Wayne Law. Now we're recording, so I'm not going to repeat all that, but basically we're really involved here. We're so glad to have a group of students here with us to listen to, but also ask questions of our guest. And our guest today is Dennis Hertel, former member of Congress, longtime attorney, and presence in Washington, D.C., someone who's built quite an impressive career. And I'm going to just talk about his bio, and then I'm going to have him kick off this conversation. Dennis was born in Detroit, lived there and went to public school. I think graduated from Denby High School, went on to Eastern Michigan University, where he earned a BS in history. Then went on to Wayne State University Law School and earned his law degree. And almost immediately, I guess, upon or like while, I think you told me, Dennis, while you were still in law school, you ran for public office, became a member of the Michigan House of Representatives. And then in 1980, you were elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where you served representing the 14th Congressional District from 1981 to 1993. You served on several committees, including the Armed Services Committee and the Merchant Marine and Fisheries Committee, where I do recall you chaired a subcommittee. And that's where I first encountered you, actually. I was a staff member working for another member of the committee, and a member that served, Representative Nita Lowy, who served with you on that committee. And we worked on a lot of really important issues, if I remember correctly, the Ocean Dumping Act amendments, lots to do with trying to deal with oil spills that were a huge problem in the late 80s and early 90s. So really, really valued the work that you did there. And you also were chair of the Investigations and Oversight Subcommittee on Armed Services, which is an awfully important part of Congress, looking after a very large budget, looking after the use of very large budget in our country. After leaving Congress in '93, you went on to practice law and have been affiliated with a couple of different firms. One of them being Johnson Rosati, very long law firm name. I'm not going to say all those names, but you were affiliated with that firm for quite some time. You also have been affiliated with the Livingston Group. And I know you've done a bunch of other things, both professionally and then to give back and serve and teach. So Dennis, I just want to welcome you. Thank you so much for being with us, and turn it over to you to just say a few words about how you got into public life and the law.
Well, thanks very much. You're making a connection with things that are so important to me. First, Carl Levin, the senator that he started, and what a mentor he was to me, and a good friend and advisor, and Professor Jack Moak and Professor Hetzel there at Wayne's Law School continued throughout my career to help me. And I don't think I would have probably stayed in law school without those two gentlemen in their assistance and advice. But let me tell you, so it's now over 50 years ago that I graduated from law school. Seems like yesterday. And we got married the weekend before Labor Day weekend, and I started class. And well, it was just like the movie Paper Chase. I didn't know what to expect, but the professor said, look at the person sitting next to you on your left, and look at the person sitting next to you on your right. And one of them will be gone in 6 months. And that was pretty true throughout the year. We did lose quite a few students that quit law school. And it was challenging at that time. But I was surprised, kind of in culture shock, because I had been at Eastern Michigan and I was head of the student government. And after the Kent State shootings, the students shut down our university over the invasion of Cambodia and in protest of President Nixon. And I came to law school because we wanted to change things. In student government, we're always going to attorneys to get their help in making changes at the university and challenges. And and First Amendment and every other part of the Constitution that we were trying to enforce. And I got to law school and talking to all these people that were my age, but they were all talking about how much money can we make and how do we make a lot of money. This was kind of a cultural shock to me when I was there, really to see how we could change the world. But my daughter went to Georgetown University here 20 years later, and law school was very much the same. We were surprised at how really much more active Wayne was in the community and in politics and in change and in a variety of challenges. And the Georgetown was sort of a blue chip law school concerned about high-end law firms, and there didn't have the internships that Wayne had, or the moot court that Wayne had, or the other developments that they had, representing the landlord tenant court and all the things that you were representing people right in the community. And but other than that, though, I was surprised as she was that law school hadn't changed much in 20 years. She was using really the same textbooks as I had at Wayne, with just some additional cases at the end. But the method, Socratic method, was still there and in the best of use, and made all the difference. I found that internships were the greatest thing, benefit to me. I worked for the city council in Detroit and ended up visiting every prison in the state, including maximum security ones, and the problem of former inmates and how we could do better to change their lives so that they would have an opportunity when they came out of prison. I was with the Attorney General, Frank Kelly, for a summer. I drove almost every day from Detroit up to Lansing, and staying there once in a while, but it was expensive, and was able to cover all the different departments and learn all about the Attorney General's office and the politics involved. And then I ran for city council that year. I'd run my brother's campaign for county commissioner in 72, and in 73 I ran for city council. There were 130 people filing for the race for the 9 seats on the council. And I came in 27th. We only had $3,000 that we spent. We went door to door every day. We didn't have any money, but we were young and we had energy. And then Carl Levin asked me to run his campaign for city council. He was in his second term, and we were able to have him come in number 1 citywide so that he became the council president. And then 4 years later, he was elected U.S. Senator for over 30 years. He served as the longest serving Michigan senator ever, and making more changes in Washington than any other senator ever had the opportunity to do. And about that time, we had Watergate. And unlike today's news, Watergate was covered really every day as we got into it more. And in 1974, when I was finishing law school, I had been a substitute teacher in Detroit to full-time. I was taking classes mostly in the afternoon and evening. I found the students that were working full-time and that were a variety of ages in the evening classes and experiences they'd had in jobs very interesting. And I also was a lifeguard in the Detroit Recreation Department and was in charge of a school in the inner city when then Mayor Gribbs decided he was going to cut the budget to try to balance it by closing all of the gyms and pools in the city, which was fine as far as laying us off as recreation workers, but that meant all the children suffered. So I had 150 kids a day come in for swimming classes after school, and for about 5 different hours of periods. And so I organized a protest around City Hall. It was December by then, snowed out that day on Saturday. And the young families came with small kids, and the TV cameras covered that pretty well. And by that night, the mayor sent his aide to offer me a job to buy me out so we wouldn't have any more protests of him closing the recreation centers. But instead, I went to the city council and met Carl Levin, and in that case, he was pounding the table saying maybe we should just close the government if we don't have money for sanitation, recreation, and basic functions and law enforcement. And that's how I got really involved with Carl later, politically, to run in his campaign. And so I ended up running in '74 for the open house seat. 2 weeks after I finished law school, I won the primary and was then up in Lansing and became judiciary chairman. And we passed the mandatory sentence for crimes committed with a gun in your possession, which is put more people in prison than any other law in the history of Michigan. The prosecutors love it because they don't have to negotiate that or plea bargain that charge. It's mandatory, and just show possession of the firearm. Because the idea was if you brought a gun, you could harm or kill somebody. If you didn't have a gun with you, you'd get less time, but you'd also have less chance of harming somebody severely. And the other law that I passed, amongst other bills, was the double bottom tanker ban. We had these huge trucks, which were twice the size of the other fuel trucks. And we had so many accidents and we had deaths from these terrible fires. We were able to ban that, go against the trucking lobby and the large companies. And so in 1980, I had the opportunity to run for Congress again. It was an open seat. And it was from Hamtramck all the way up to Sterling Heights and Utica, and then all the way over to the Lake St. Clair and Grosse Pointes. And I ran against a TV anchor, Vic Caputo. He'd been the anchor of the CBS News there for 20 years, and he raised $500,000, the first one to raise that kind of money and go on television for a seat that was local rather than county or statewide. And we went door to door. We didn't have his money. We only were able to raise $126,000, but I had the union endorsements, and I had 3,000 volunteers help me go door to door, and I did that for 6 months every day. So then I went to Washington with the landslide of Ronald Reagan. He even carried my Detroit district, and got on the Armed Services Committee. I was the only vote out of 50 people on the House Armed Services Committee to oppose his doubling of the defense budget, because I knew you couldn't spend money properly like that, throwing billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions at military equipment and weapons without the proper oversight was a ridiculous waste of our taxpayer money. And was able to stop. It took 6 years to stop Reagan from his MX missile. He wanted to take our largest transportable missile, put it on railroad cars, as they did in the Soviet Union then, and take it around our country through civilian areas and right through the middle of cities, so that the Russians couldn't keep track of where the railroad cars were. But of course, they could keep track of it for obviously several different ways, including spy satellites and spies on the ground even. And why it took us 6 years, it shows you that the tenor of the country wasn't that much different than it can be now sometimes as far as military spending. We also stopped home porting. Reagan wanted to, instead of having most of our ships in, which made sense, in Virginia at Norfolk and San Diego, have a concentration of them for repairs and work and personnel. He wanted to put a port in every major city. So New York City and then Los Angeles and Boston and on and on. He had a list of 12 cities. And he wanted to even increase money spent on the weather station. He wanted to put that in West Virginia, all to lobby for the Department of Defense to get more people and more jobs and more spending in the other communities, to have even a larger lobby for a larger defense budget. Of course, it didn't make any sense to put ships in different ports in a nuclear age and supersonic fighter planes that could take them out. So I was able to stop that. We only stopped it, though, by 2 votes after Senator Goldwater, the chief conservative in the Senate, joined with me to stop it. It's a terrible waste of money. So then with reapportionment, when I came to Congress in 1980, we had never lost a congressman. Michigan was always growing. But with reapportionment every 10 years, we had lost population. And now for the first time, we were going to lose a congressman. Since then, we've gone from 19 when I came in 1980 down to only 13 Congress people today from Michigan. And so I left Congress at that point because I was going to have to run against Sandy Levin, Carl's brother, who was, he had run for governor twice. I had run his campaign in Macomb and in Detroit in 1974. And yeah, I was going to run against my friend. We agreed on all the issues, didn't make any sense. And so at the young age of 44, I went into private practice. And at first I was the vice president of the National Environmental Policy Institute, but that really wasn't going to pay for kids going to college. And so then I went into government relations and lobbying. And so for 30 years now, I've been doing that, and joined for a while with one of the larger firms. Bob Livingston had been the Republican chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and he and I were the partners in that firm. And but then I went with, now I'm with the Franklin Partnership today for the last 12 years. And I've had candidates, I've had clients such as Detroit Metro Airport. I don't know if you remember when it was one of the worst airports in the country. Now we're always consistently in the top 5 or 10. We rebuilt it completely and tripled the size of it, finishing up in about the year 2000. President Clinton was active with us in doing that. I've been in charge of Blue Cross and Blue Shield, working with the vice president there in Washington for 20 years now. I've been with the Henry Ford Museum for 27 years, and we were able to get money after it had been shut down for 2 years because of COVID. We're able to get money to relieve that expense, and they almost went under after 110 years. But now they're the biggest ticket item again, the biggest draw in the entire Midwest, and very successful. And my favorite client all time is the Samaritan Center. We took a hospital by Chandler Park there in Detroit, in my old neighborhood, and the church gave it to us, and we made it into a community center. We have 80 community groups. Every nonprofit group you can think of. We have kidney dialysis. We have dental care. We have wellness center. We have job training. We have a whole room, 20 by 40, just with clothes and makeup for women for job interviews. We have substance abuse. We also have all the city, state, and federal programs under one building. So if you have low income people, it's hard for all of us to know where to get assistance in government programs. But so they're not put back on the bus to go to some other building downtown in the rain. Instead, we're just saying, no, go to the second floor. We have food stamps up there. We have unemployment on the third floor. We have, all the different services. And to the extent that we think one-stop shopping is a national model, really, where we're not sending people all over the place. We save all these community groups, and we save all these government offices money as far as security, free parking, heating, everything you can think of. But mostly it's synergism. During the pandemic, these groups wouldn't have survived with such a skeleton staff and low funding and low participation if they weren't hanging together and getting strength from each other, but mainly serving the public. We serve 55,000 families a year in that community center. And I'm still working now. We've got to redo it again. The elevators and things are worn out after all these years. And Senator Stabenow is working with us to move ahead on that community center. And I'm teaching now for the last 12 years at the National Defense University about how our federal government works, how Congress works. It's becoming more difficult, I can tell all of you, every day, because it doesn't work very well right now. And I think that in the Levin Center, you're able to expose that and deal with it and learn about it and know how to improve it and lead the nation in doing so in the future. On the board of the former members of Congress, we have a program. We have over 600 members. We have a program where Congress to Campus, where we send a Republican and a Democrat, always a bipartisan way, to talk to students on over 40 campuses a year. And about 10 different weekends are spent on Zoom, but the others are all in person. And it's kind of like when Senator Ribicoff came to my college, Eastern Michigan, and I was a junior, and he spent all day with us in different classes. And then we had a big assembly at night. in the auditorium, and I went up to him after and I said, Senator Ribicoff, I said, are you running for president? And it's so great of you to be here with us and take this time. And he said, no, I'm not running for president. He said, I'm doing what President Kennedy told us to do. He asked us to go out to the country and talk about getting young people involved in government to make our democracy stronger. So that's the task that still goes on. It's become more difficult, I think, in the last generation. But I'm still optimistic that our country will continue to improve and that we'll have a greater opportunity for people. And I'm going to stop talking now all this time and take your questions and about what's going on now and what's happened before. And I just know that the key to me moving ahead always was in college, going to a meeting to meet the debate team. We didn't have debate in Detroit schools, but I was always interested in it. And I joined the debate club that night. And then I took the class for debate and got a scholarship that got me through college, or joining the student government at Wayne's Law School. And they sent me to the ABA convention. And then I met Justice Douglas, of all people, and got to talk with him, who gave me a real excitement about the changes that could be made and that young people could be part of that. So, it's just joining and working together has been the key. And I think that's what you see in the Levin Center, where they do it in a bipartisan way and they move ahead and they help other people get off the dime and realize that we can do better. So I've talked enough. Good to be with you.
Well, Dennis, thank you so much for that. We would love to move now to some Q&A. So I welcome any of the students who have questions. Just raise your hand, or just let. Okay, we have a question from the field. Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Megan Rumples. I'm going to be interning with the Levin Center this summer, and hearing you speak has been really, incredible, all of the positive work that you've been able to do. And it really humbles me to just know how much change that you've affected. And I know a lot of us, including myself, have an incredible amount of hope, optimism, and excitement for enacting change. But I know that sometimes, especially when we're reading these cases as a 1L, some of that excitement can dwindle, or possibly our hope for how change can be enacted. We realized certain things that we didn't know before. And I wanted to know if you could speak to any experiences that you've had with being in these roadblocks towards your goals, towards helping others.
I think the biggest thing I've learned from Carl Levin was always to reach across the aisle, and the people that you think are the most conservative or that you wouldn't be able to make progress with very often are the ones that you can find common ground with on different subjects. And if it's not today, maybe it's tomorrow. So, keeping those contacts open and always realizing that every issue is a new issue and a new opportunity, I think is the key. And then that ties in with the second one that I learned, which I had none of when I started law school, was patience. I can't have it my way. People forget the basics, like, how did we get a country? Well, people think, well, we fought the Revolutionary War and then we had the United States, we had a constitution. Well, they couldn't agree. They just had the Confederation and that didn't work, and they couldn't agree. And how could you take a state like New York and Pennsylvania and Virginia and their size and then make a country with the places so small like Rhode Island and Delaware in population and area? And so they had this great compromise, right? They call it the Connecticut Compromise. And that is that you'd have 2 senators from every state, no matter how big. I mean, right now we've got California with over 40 million people, and we've got Wyoming with less than 1 million, right? They each get 2 senators, and then do the House by population. Is that a fair arrangement? And giving more power to the Senate as far as treaties and appointments? Is that a fair? I don't think the word fair comes in. It's a compromise, though. It's a trade-off for many things, and it's a way to go forward and have a country, because there's no perfect answer to how you put that hodgepodge together. You make a compromise, and I think that's something I had to learn. When I was young, I I thought, well, I had the best idea always, and we should do it my way. And then I had to learn this other ability. It's kind of like when I learned when I went to Washington that the price of gasoline in Detroit was terrible because that meant less car sales and more out of our pocket. But Louisiana or Oklahoma or Texas, that was the job market increasing when the price of oil went up. So yeah, I had to learn that there are balances of everything that happened in the country when it's so diverse, and that we just can't have one way. People have forgotten that today, and some people say, well, my way or the highway, or never compromise, never surrender, and all this stuff, all these slogans they have. That doesn't move anything forward. That's just sloganizing to yourself. It doesn't. That's not leadership.
Dennis, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experience in law school and how it changed you. You obviously had an orientation toward leadership. You took a leadership position when you were in college, in student government. But you later on, you just mentioned a moment ago about how compromise, how you learned the value of compromise. Were there courses in law school or experiences you had in law school that shaped you and prepared you for the public career that you pursued?
Well, one of the most dynamic that I remember is in the middle of Watergate, and Watergate used to be covered every day on television, in live hearings and all during the day, and then into the evening news shows about Watergate. And one of my evening professors in business law, of all things, told us to close our books and we were going to talk about ethics. That's before we actually had much of an ethics class at the law school or other law schools also. And he said, we've got all these lawyers involved in what's happening regarding Watergate and all these lawyers who broke the law. And we talked about that in detail. We talked about what it meant to be a lawyer and the ethics of it all, and how important that was to the country, and how important that had meant to moving civilization forward. And that really is always stuck with me, that it really is an honor to have the opportunity to be a lawyer and to be able to do things, instead of hand-to-hand combat, to be able to do things in a legal, cooperative way with other people, and moving towards progress, I guess is the way I put it.
Well, as I mentioned, anybody who has a question, if a question occurs to you, just fire away. Until then, I'll just ask another one. I've been wondering about your experience in Congress and how the training you received as a lawyer informed how you actually operated as a member of Congress over those 12 years that you were in Congress.
Well, you always have an edge. What's true is that, whether you join a law firm or you become a teacher, a professor, or whether, you go into business or you're in-house counsel, you always have an edge on knowing the law, because almost every question deals with the law eventually in business, and certainly in government. That's obviously true. So we don't need all the Congress people to be lawyers, but the ones that are attorneys, and that's why I think it's always been a plurality in most societies that lawyers are in government, is an advantage, I would say, in every single case. Just when I represented Detroit Metro Airport, I didn't know anything about airports. I'd never been on a transportation committee. I didn't even know the basics of how they were funded and operated under the law, as far as the specifics. And yet I was able to do all of that because of my legal training. I knew what questions to ask and who to go to regarding all the different people in the transportation department, and make progress on it, and I think cut the time in half of going forward with the development. So I think it's that legal training that it cuts through in so many ways. You're just ahead of everybody else, just sometimes only one step or a half step, but it's an advantage. You don't have to always ask somebody else. You know where to go.
Were there any particular courses in law school that you would recommend a law student take who was thinking about running for office someday?
Well, I'm trying to remember the title of it because the last class I had my last semester, it was women's law issues, and that was, I thought, um, the most important to me as far as politics, because it brought forth all of the discrimination. You know, my mother and mother-in-law were born in 1920, and women couldn't vote in America until then, and they just didn't get the right to vote. They had to fight for it and go to jail for it, and have hunger strikes for it. And when I went to law school, they had, in 1971, they had total discrimination against women. And when they opened that up about 1973, 74, to fairness, and just on the merits, we suddenly had, within a few years, we had a majority of women that were in law school. So those kinds of things were, and minority students' rights too, definitely was a big factor. As to specific classes, though, Jim, I obviously constitutional law, legislation that was taught by Otto Hetzel. He wrote 4 books on legislation while I was a professor there. Those things were good. To see Jack Moak operating in the community and showing us what could be done to make changes, whether it was his neighborhood in Jefferson Chalmers, or whether it was with the governor, he was working to integrate the schools. You know, the last time I saw people this angry was in 1974 with the busing controversy in Detroit, and the anger and hatred that people had out in the open. Some people just shocked me that I would never think would be so emotional about a public issue when we're talking about school children. And Jack Moak was a leader in that. It made all the difference in putting everything back in order and having progress go forward for the school children. So it was a combination of the classes I had, but also those professors and what they were doing, and leadership really that they had in the community and in the law and in the government.
What about skills as a lawyer? You know, whether that's during law school or after law school, what do you think are the most important skills beginning in law school that you developed that really served you as you've been a lawyer?
Well, for me, it was moot court. That was the greatest. And what I enjoyed the most was landlord-tenant court. And when I finished law school, even though I was in the legislature, I did assignments in criminal court, and really enjoyed that and learned a great deal every hour, every minute I was there. And they were doing so many cases all the time in criminal court. So it was and for the law review, I don't know if you still have that, but when I was there, you either had to have the grades, the higher grades, to get on the law review, be selected, or you could join the competition. And my first year grades were not that good, and I was upset. And of all things, I entered that competition, writing competition, to be on the law review, and I made it. And so that gave me a new confidence too. But it also gave me a confidence in later doing appellate briefs, especially in between my careers of when I was running for office and didn't want any conflict of interest for the state house or Congress, doing appellate briefs for other attorneys, but also in my writing ability in Congress and in government. So instead of always turning it over to staff, to be able to do it personally and to be able to do it for publications and for print also. So all those things I think were really applicable to what I did. But I would say that the moot court program and the internship program at Wayne, I think, is second to none in the country.
Yeah, I would certainly agree that writing, this is something we emphasize to every law student we work with, particularly ones that are hoping to do an internship, legal internship with a congressional committee, that being able to write, really working on that and using the courses that you're taking as opportunities, even if they're not writing courses or seminar courses, your ability to, when you're preparing for class, to summarize issues and even write some notes to yourself in a cogent way is often what you're kind of called to do when you're gonna, think on your feet in a debate, or maybe you're doing legal work and you've got to be prepared. Being able to summarize information quickly is so important.
Jim,
I'm trying to remember all the.
question in the back that I've been trying to slot in. Apologies.
Oh, okay. We have another question. Let's go ahead.
I'd like to first of all thank Wayne State for being here for help. I have a schizophrenic diagnosis and I have hallucination. And Wayne State has been very important in helping me to understand that experience and making it a very meaningful experience going forward, particularly with the interactions that I have with the legal system. Certainly, the United States has an impressive history bringing about representative government to the people. And I'm glad to see the Levin Center getting involved in high schools, bringing about civic education so that people can know how important it is to participate in a democracy and in their government, and how important their government is to them. So I wanted to say that, and I want to say congratulate the Levin Center for its existence. I'm going to be following you on social media, and I particularly have interest in this particular presentation today because the next couple of centuries is going to be challenging in terms of preserving the democracy. So I'm going to be following you to see how you engage the community in participating in that process.
Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that so much. Do we have any other questions among the students? I can't see everybody, so let me know if you do. One thing, Dennis, I thought the students would really be interested to know about was sort of the environment for a lawyer in Washington. You've obviously used your degree in a variety of ways. You live in Washington, and I understand have lived there for some time. How would you describe the environment? And is it changing? Has it changed over the course of the, say 30 years that you've been, in practicing as you have?
Well, I think it has. Obviously I deal in the political world, and in the 70s, we got along well with the Republican counterparts, and it was very friendly, but we also agreed on education. They would be endorsed by the Michigan Education Association. We agreed on the environment. Nixon even started the EPA. Around the time we started Earth Day, he had some progressive policies. We agreed on healthcare back then in the 70s. Then when Reagan came to town in 80 and became president, things changed, and we started to defund, cut funding for public education, and it hurt. When I was a student back then, everybody could afford law school or afford college. You might have to work another shift, but there were plenty of jobs, and they paid well. And you could join the union even as a newcomer, and everything was moving ahead. But then we started destroying the unions with Reagan, with the transit workers strike, and then we had the cutbacks, as I say, in education and housing. We started going backwards, and it used to be still, though, that we had agreement. We were able to work with some Republican congressmen and stay at their houses when you had a hearing. Things were still social, and but it went downhill. It still exists today that you can find common ground between the two parties. It still exists today that you can find people that want to move ahead and better our country and improve our government. But it's become more difficult when there's so much distortion of facts and reality about what the situation is. We have plenty of differences of opinion, that's fine. But when you can't agree on what the factual situation is, it's hard to move forward. And that's the crisis we're in now. But I think we'll get beyond that, because I think there are enough people, and a majority of people in the country and in the government, that by a slimmer margin, but in the government too, that want to move ahead, and I hope we can continue to do that. And I think that's why it is such an important election year.
We have another question. Yes.
Sir, I wanted to ask if you had any advice for attorneys that are, we're all, most of us are 1Ls, going forward with our internships, going forward into our first jobs. What can we do to make the most of these first initial experiences in the law? Thank you.
Well, I think, obviously be prepared, but I think it's asking questions and it's learning, and it's how to look at things a different way sometimes, and to learn how to have a different perspective on issues and on questions, and then working with people, building relationships with people, and having a lot of interest outside of law school too, I think, as much as possible, politically and socially and other ways too, because we in our society really needs that. One thing about America, we're unique in joining together with diverse people, whether it's, we're the first ones to have libraries, the first ones to have community groups of all kinds, the first to have fire departments that are cooperative, and to do all kinds of other social interaction, because we learn from people, and we learn to see things a different way, and get beyond ourselves. And I think that's the key, especially for lawyers, because you're going to be the one to make those changes and help innovate the new policies and create new policies and lead the way. So the more variety you have of experiences, the more variety you have dealing with people with different viewpoints, I think the more successful that makes you.
I have one more question that really speaks to the issue of specialization. So one thing I'm sure you've observed, Dennis, over the course of your legal career is that it seems like lawyers increasingly specialize in fairly narrow ways over the course of their careers. Do you think Washington is different in the sense that does it require specialization, or do you have the ability to work in a number of different areas in DC as a lawyer versus maybe some other markets? What is your sense about, I guess, the value of being a specialist or moving really quickly to specialize in something versus staying a little more flexible in your career?
No, that's what I was trying to get at before when I was talking about my government relations career. I look at it as lawyers are utility fielders, outfielders, for baseball. I mean, you're educated in a variety of things. The law obviously covers every variety of things, and your experiences. That's why I'm reaching out that you have more experiences in life too, and with contact with people of different viewpoints, because that prepares you then to operate in different ways as you're going to be called upon. That's why I was pointing out that I knew nothing about the airports and that whole area of transportation at all, but I was able to represent them and build Metro Airport out. And it's been that way with every client practically that I've had. I didn't want to do defense clients because I'd done enough of that in 12 years, and I didn't like the idea of me making decisions on how much money was spent on things and what weapons went forward and all the rest, and then continuing to do that as a lobbyist. I thought that was unpalatable to me. I wanted to do different things, and because I was an attorney and because I had that experience at Wayne and because I had experience in the community, then I was able to have a variety of interests and learn about new things. And it's that key of always asking somebody else. People, after I left Congress, I'd go to the different departments, and like transportation, I'd go there in person, and they'd never really talked to very many people from Congress. They'd in that kind of capacity, they'd come to the congressman's office and answer questions. And so for me to go to their office and ask them questions, they told me they enjoyed that, and they wanted to then know my viewpoint of things about what Congress was doing. So we had a great exchange, but I was learning at the base level from them. And then they would direct me to other people. And it was because the legal training and experience that, you're able to focus on where do you move to? Who do you ask? Who's in charge of this? Where's the jurisdiction? What's happened in the past? What's the record? What's the history? What's the jurisprudence on the whole issue? that I was able to do that. I think when other professions wouldn't be able to move around as much. That's why I say everybody who goes to law school, I think, has the ability to be a utility outfielder, because you can move to any capacity on any subject and learn about it and be useful.
Well,
And also to
speaking
be
of,
direct. To be direct, I learned, I can't remember which professor, I'm trying to think now, about like Hemingway. Ask direct questions, do your writing directly, get to the point, and you don't need to be superfluous and all the rest. That's for a novelist or somebody, not for a lawyer.
what you've just said raised one other thing I was thinking of asking you, Dennis, which is a lot of our student body, of course, is from Michigan, not entirely. Certainly we have our students that come from all over the country, but it's concentrated in Michigan. And, we're offering the opportunity for people to go to DC and begin their careers or begin their legal careers in DC. And there's a bit of a trade-off there. If you're thinking that maybe someday you'd want to return to Michigan, how difficult it is, do you think, for somebody who started their career, maybe started practicing law in some capacity in Washington, to then move? And is it easier if you're a lawyer in Washington to move, say, back to Michigan or to another state than it is if you were, say, in New York or, Texas or some other state? Does DC give you a little more flexibility to move around?
Well, it reminds me of Congressman Ron Dellums, who became chairman of the Armed Services Committee. He's a black congressman, a leader in the Black Caucus. And people used to say to him, what do you want? You're a liberal. What do you want to be on the Armed Services Committee for? He said, I want to tell you where the most jobs in the entire world are. They're in the Department of Defense. And if you want to make changes and you want to have better opportunities for people and you want to integrate, then that's the place to do it. Well, if you want to be a lawyer, then the most lawyers in the world are in Washington, D.C., as far as I know. So you're going to have more experience and more opportunity in Washington, D.C. than anything else. You're going to be able to take that opportunity back to Michigan, and then you're going to be the only guy in the room that has that opportunity in Detroit, that can talk to the people about what's really happening over at the Department of Transportation, what's really happening on the Armed Services Committee in Congress, and all the rest. And, my daughter was a page in the Senate. She knows some things I don't know about the U.S. Senate. So, there's just a lot you can learn of being on the inside. My other daughter was a scheduler for a congressman from Michigan, and she has a whole raft of knowledge from that she learned more there as being a scheduler for him with all the different subjects and people that came in than she did in 3 years of law school at Georgetown. So, it really does open up all these doors for you as far as meeting people from all over the world, but also having expertise and then a variety of issues from all the people you meet in Washington that you're able to touch base with and go forward and see that you might want to work in this area or that area. But whatever you take home to Michigan, I think you'll have an advantage over the other people in Michigan by having that experience in Washington.
Well, are there any other questions among the students? All right, well, hearing not, Dennis, I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to share, but I do want to thank you for taking time to be with us today and to share your experiences and share your insight into kind of what it's like to use a law, be a Wayne law student and then move on to do so many interesting and varied things in Washington.
No, thank you, Jim. I just wanted to say how proud I am that I went to Wayne and your national reputation there. And sorry I can't be there today in person, but hope to be in the future, and I wish all of you well.
Thank
We
you.
wish you well, Dennis. And next time I'm in Washington, I will definitely let you know in advance and see if we can get together. It would be lovely to see you in person again. It's been a while.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.
Thank you.